The first tip that I'm going to teach you about is getting your engine moving. This is extremely important in the game, and this is how you get additional workers. As an example, this is the first map for the scenario known as Fear of the Unknown. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on a portion of this town that's of great importance. There's going to be two locations here. We have the Laborers Union, and we also have Town Hall. And what we have is an icon. It's a circular icon with a plus symbol in the middle. And what that means is that you can get additional servants. Since this is a worker placement game, the more workers that you have, the better off that you're going to be, because those workers can gather additional resources or do other things for you. So as an example, if you have the Laborers Union and you take one of your pieces, I'm going to go ahead and place that piece right here. It's basically saying that you can spend $1 to gain a servant. Now, the other thing that you need to notice is that there's a infinity sign over an equal sign in the middle here, and it's a little bit hard to see on the screen. What that means is that when you place a worker at that location, you can take that action as many times as you would like. So what exactly does that mean? What that means is that you can spend 1 coin to gain 1 servant. So I'll go ahead and just pop out. And notice that we have the lost section of the board down here. So for that 1 coin, I can gain an additional servant. If I want, I can spend a 2nd coin to also gain a 2nd servant. So that infinity sign and the equal sign means that you can take that action as many times as possible. Note, though, however, that the action also includes the payment. So once that transaction is done, you're going to take your 2 workers, your 2 servants, and then you're going to move them over to your quarters. So from this point onward, now you have 2 additional workers that you can use to go back to the town and do other things in your estate. So getting your engine primed means getting more workers. So I recommend that as a new player, or as any player, look at the board and get your workers as soon as possible. Next up, we're going to talk about the creepy track, and it's located at the top portion of the board. When the game starts, typically you have a pretty big gap in which the townsfolk still trust the people that are experimenting in town. But please note that this track up here is kind of a communal track. So every single player on the board is going to potentially be causing problems on this creepy track. So if other players do things that are creepy, it makes the townsfolk very, very worried. So every single person on the table can affect the creepy track. Now notice that there are certain places that you can go that impact this track, and the first one is going to be the cemetery. I'll go ahead and pop back out. So if you notice on here, if you send any sort of worker to the cemetery, you can go ahead and gain a body, which is a raw material ingredient. But by doing that, it's going to do a couple of different things. And the first one, and I'm going to go ahead and just zoom out a little bit. So we have this creepy icon. So if the purple player goes to the cemetery, it's going to increase their creepiness by 1. But it also moves the Bob token as well. So this is going to move toward the origin of the board. So as these 2 tokens approach each other, it's going to become more and more dangerous for the players to perform experiments. So if these things ever touch and overlap, so let's say we hit here and here, what that means is that the purple player can no longer send people into the town, so they're basically banned from the town because they're not trusted. And the only exception to this is that they can go to the church. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll over here and then kind of zoom in on the church. So when you go to the church, this basically moves your creepy marker back the other way. So you can start becoming less and less creepy by going to church. This is a pretty big issue for you, though, because it's going to prevent you from grabbing and gaining all the different resources that are in the town. It basically shuts you down for a period of time until you become less creepy. So one thing I'm going to recommend is that players Pay attention not only to what they're doing, but what their opponents are doing, because this mob token will be moving over the course of the game. So you really have to keep yourself in check and try not to do too many creepy things. Otherwise, it kind of shuts down your engine and you won't be able to gather resources from the town. Next up, we're going to go into a little bit more detail for the Insanity track and ways to keep out of trouble. So the Insanity track is going to be located at the bottom portion of the board. And one of the danger zones that you can get into as being a player is that if you build up too many of these compulsion cards, when you hit the end of the generation, that leads to a maladjustment for the next generation. And these are always super bad, and they cause problems with the next generation. So kind of how this works is, when you do perform certain experiments, there's going to be the ability to create what's called insanity tokens. And I'm just going to go ahead and put this onto the screen. So as you look at the bottom of this card, there's the insanity icon located on there. So if you were to play this experiment, your insanity would increase by 1. And then when it increases on this track, it triggers what's called a compulsion. So you go ahead and draw this compulsion, and this one's not too bad. It says must collect a chemical. And if you do so, you collect 2 victory points. So this can be kind of good for you. But if you have, let's say, 2 of these at the end of a generation that you haven't completed, that's going to then lead you to draw a compulsion card, and it's going to mess up the next generation. So this one is, during the middle years, immediately lose 4 victory points if you place yourself on an estate action. That's pretty bad, and that's something that you definitely want to stay away from. So as you play this game, please notice that your compulsion is going to keep going up and up and up. And also, if you notice down here as well, I'm going to go ahead and just zoom in a little bit so it's easier to see. Please note that this also can build up creepy on the other track. So as you start going through these experiments, it gets worse and worse and worse. At one point, this is going to drive your spouse away. So this icon means you actually lose your spouse because they basically leave the estate. So as we scroll across this tracker in this bar, you can see that things get really out of control. At this point, you're going to be losing an estate upgrade. And then once you hit here, you're going to be losing victory points if you, have more and more insanity building up. So it's possible for you to just go absolutely crazy, literally insane in this game, and it causes a massive amount of problems. You're going to be losing servants here over the course of this, and it gets worse and worse and worse. So one thing that you should note is that you can get rid of these compulsion cards, and please ensure that if you do have any compulsion cards, you only have basically 1 of the compulsion cards at the end of the generation, or 0. If you could do that, you can avoid the maladjustments. So please balance that very carefully. So when you're completing experiments, keep that in mind. And it often sneaks up on many new players. I've noticed it. Sometimes they have like 3 or 4 of these things built up, and it just really causes a lot of havoc for them over the course of the game. At this point, I've made numerous videos for my father's work, and hopefully you've enjoyed each and every one of them. The whole core of these videos is to really give you a different perspective, and this comes from gamers. So when we play these games, we play it in a fairly large group, and oftentimes we have more people sitting at the game table than we have players for this game. So in this case, we had either 5 or 6 people sitting around the table every time we played this game. So we were able to get the perspectives from multiple people, and these are all gamer style people. And that's really important for you as a person watching this video. You get the best tips and tricks from all of the people sitting around the table, not just myself. So I take their advice very seriously, as well as my own observations, and I kind of compile it. So hopefully you've learned some cool tips and tricks for this game, and I want to thank you for joining me today, and as always, have fun gaming.